And Foster Square was synonymous with not just the place of torture, but death.
Timol was the first person to die from here.
I don't think I'd be wrong in saying that Timol would have been kept awake from the time of his arrest, literally. The interrogation went on day and night, and it was relentless, and it never stopped until that person cooperated.
Jump, impossible. He could not have done, not Ahmed.
He was thrown out, or he was hung from there, or something happened.
In my view, he has not jumped.
He jumped. It was an interrogation, in my opinion, an interrogation gone wrong. Tragically.
Indians can't fly.
A really bizarre phraseology that they used, almost gleefully, but the sadism was very clearly there.
A very funny joke for people to say about such a tragedy.
He fell from the 9th floor. He hanged himself. He slipped on a piece of soap while washing. He hanged himself. He hung from the 9th floor. He washed from the 9th floor while slipping. He hung from a piece of soap while washing.
What we can say with certainty is that Timol was a brave young man who believed in freedom and justice, and who fought for non-racialism and democracy.
Our grandfather, Ismail Dinda, came to Brighton in 1916. He established a business in Brighton, and he was, very generous. He would employ people. All those that came from India, they didn't have any jobs. He'd give them jobs. And if he found that the chaps that worked for him were good people, he'd get them married to his own daughters. Such was Ahmed Timol's father. He was working for my grandfather. When he was a marriageable age, he said, let me send you over to India and get you married to my daughter. Ahmed was born in this house in one of the middle rooms in 1941. Ahmed, such a lovable child, always smiling, always pleasant, always helpful. Ahmed was here up till 1948 when Haji Sahib Timol, Ahmed Timol's father, decided now, we're getting too many in the business, and I want to have my own business. He then moved over to Rudapurt.
He was very shy, came from a very religious family, and he was stuttering. And coming from a small town to a bigger area, everybody felt like didn't want to associate with him, even more so because he stuttered. So I was the first one who started talking to him, made friends with him, told the others, introduced him to others to say, no, he'll be a fine fellow. And that was the beginning of a long-term relationship. And of course, we used to play cricket together. And he turned out to be an outstanding cricketer one time. Had there been no apartheid, he would have been an outstanding South African batsman. We were both considered, from a young age, right up to college level, right up to school level, as always very well dressed. Not that we were rich, but that was one of our hallmark. We were both considered ladies' men, right? We were both in Johannesburg Indian High School. And Ahmed at that time wasn't political at all. I was a little bit, because I started politics at a very early age due to influences from my parents, who used to Dadu at school, and also because I attended the first protest march at the Johannesburg Indian High School. So Ahmad wasn't around at that time. So I began to tell Ahmad some of these stories. He didn't comment, but he listened very carefully. Dr. Dadu, I think, had a great deal of influence on all of us, including myself, including Ahmad. We became very good friends with Isop and Aziz Pahad.
Ahmad's father was a very close friend of my father. Ahmad spent a lot of time with our family.
As we graduated in our political maturity and understanding, it was clear that we were learning from each other. And Ahmad also went through, in that sense, I think, through our political maturity. It's the same sort of period that Ahmad and Yusuf went through their political maturity, Yusuf and I and the two of them.
I remember that he encouraged us to read. He encouraged us to listen to the political developments, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world. Ahmad was also my school teacher when I was in high school. And his understanding of history and the way he used to teach the students was to try and make them think about the environment, the political environment that we are living in. The thing I knew was that he was involved with the ANC. I knew he was, but we never discussed it. We never discussed it at any stage.
I had already finished my teacher's training in college and I was teaching at Rhodoput School. And I worked from behind the scenes to get Ahmad into that. We did an excellent job in changing the thinking of the students. Became increasingly active, and at the Rhodoput Indian School we organized too many demonstrations and protests and so forth. And it appeared that we were being constantly watched by the special branch, but even by some students who were reporting to the special branch. And at one time they picked up about half a dozen students at the Rhodoput School, tortured them, right? And some of them, of course, under torture and duress gave our names. So we discussed it with people in the underground of the Congress. And they said, best is you get out of here. So more or less we left at the same time. By that time the Pahad brothers had already left for London. So Ahmad went to London and I went to Zambia, to Lusaka.
Africa is getting more and more digitized and people have to navigate through an increasingly connected world.
I did a call my bay over here.
At school, I use my Wi-Fi.
On Network, we tell you about Africa's technology and social media landscape.
Politicians already do use Twitter a lot.
It's both Android and iOS compatible.
A solar charged box that includes everything, the computer, the projector.
That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m.
Ahmad had left South Africa, he went to Mecca, he performed Hajj, and then he proceeded through the Middle East, and he then finally arrived in London, and he joined and stayed with his closest of friends.
So from Mecca he then came to London. We didn't know when he was coming. We just heard a knock on the door of the flat, and there he was standing with his bag.
I think all hell broke loose. We spent till late the next morning partying and getting all the stories from him. And
as part of his training, to come back and do the work of Umkhonto overseas were here. Ahmed once came home covered in soot because I think they were learning how to make a bomb, and it flew up and damaged the kitchen.
I was in Leicester. He came to Leicester to tell me that he was going to be away for some time. And he told me that he was going to the Soviet Union. My reaction, a gut reaction was, that's danger. From what I got to hear years later, he went with Ann Nicholson and with Thabo Mbeki.
And therefore for him to be asked to go to the Institute of Social Science, which is really Lenin, the party school in Moscow for a year, was indeed for him a great honor and a privilege, as it was for all of us who went there.
There he also had his military combat work training. That's how do you carry out underground work, how do you develop underground structures, how do you protect yourself against infiltration, etc. So he had an extensive shooting and all that, but he had expensive training, secret communications in that field.
And at some stage, Ahmed came back to Leicester. This was around 1970, January or February, and he told me that he was returning to South Africa. And here again, my reaction, which I did not voice out, but the feeling was that there's danger.
There was a position that he had adopted to say, I cannot be away. I cannot prosecute the struggle from far away. I need to be back and do it inside the country.
Make no mistake, the ANC, SACP alliance were good soldiers in the field. If they weren't, we would have stopped this war in 5 years or 2 years or whatever. There was a great responsibility on the police to fight this terror onslaught. Yes, we were very amateurish in the beginning, but we soon went through a learning curve.
The stupid Boers that we used to think we were dealing with in the 60s were no longer the same enemy we were dealing with in the 70s.
The fact that so many people close to him, from family to friends to students, the teaching here, and associates, were blind to the fact that this fine youngster is actually having a double life, a clandestine, a secret side, in which he is working to build up an underground network and is producing clandestinely, secretly, producing leaflets and having these distributed. And it's an absolute testament, a tribute to how well he was working.
Betrayal always shadowed us. It walked with us all the time.
We had informants all over.
Timol was ostensibly betrayed.
And this was not by informers, this was pure luck that the police arrested him. When he was caught, he was a valuable catch.
You know, they were so frustrated, the special branch, that when they finally got their hands on Ahmed, and there were the leaflets and there were devices for leaflet bombs, etc., they felt this is the kingpin, this is the key guy. And I've no doubt that all that pent-up rage and frustration was visited on him.
sight of that building, John Foster Square, all of a sudden, just popping out, its massive concrete architecture, its darkness, it connoted a terror.
I think John Foster Square was sort of synonymous with, for especially amongst political activists, as sort of not just the place of torture but death.
John Foster the building became very famous, depending on your view, or very notorious.
Everybody knew the legend of the 10th floor. And it was a big joke to say, well, now we're taking you up to the 10th floor. And it was like, oh my God, you know. That was room 1026 on the 10th floor, was known throughout my career as Die Ware Kamer, the truth room. You know, this was the fear factor. We'll take you to the truth room. You know, nobody ever leaves you alive or unbroken. And it was sort of out of bounds to the staff in general. I mean, I really worked with people that didn't even know that such things were happening. I don't think I'd be wrong in saying that Timo would have been kept awake from the time of his arrest, literally.
They were trained to make sure that the white state is safe.
Interrogation went on day and night, and it was relentless, and it never stopped until that person cooperated. You can only imagine what you like after 2 or 3 days. And then toss into this equation the fear that you're going to be killed, that your life is in the hands of the interrogators.
You are in those circumstances alone, surrounded by burly, hefty, abusive policemen. And I think that whatever strength you have gets called to its utmost to protect you under those circumstances, because you are vulnerable like nobody's business.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
He must have been totally terrified. The only rest would have come once a confession was obtained and he was in the torture process. But certainly they would have beaten the hell out of him. It was an interrogation, in my opinion, an interrogation gone wrong, tragically.
They said he jumped. That one, he left by the window. They casually boast, grinning into pain. A man does not fall like stone. There is blinding light at the center of an explosion. Transfixed, the murderers stand above the abyss.
Well, I think somebody from London phoned me. I think it was Aziz Pahad who phoned me to say, have you heard about Ahmad? I said, what about Ahmad? And he said, Ahmad is dead. And I couldn't hold back. And I said, how? At first I thought it was a health problem. And he said, no, he was killed in detention. So I just lost myself. I said, thank you for letting me know. I'll try and find out more. I put the phone down. I couldn't stop crying. It was interesting, crying at the same time, but anger inside me at the same time.
It was most difficult to imagine that somebody as gentle and kindly as him could have been subjected to such vicious, horrendous physical torture.
He jumped to save his people from not divulging his secrets to the police.
I could just not accept that a person like him would want to end his life. Okay, he may have suffered torture, punishment, but why would he was still alive? Why would he want to jump? You know, there was a massive funeral, right? Virtually the whole Gauteng region was there for that funeral, one of the biggest funerals that we witnessed.
This is where the bier with late Ahmed Timol's body was laid to rest, put down for viewing. There were thousands of people lined up on the roads here outside behind me, on Murray Street that is. And everybody had a chance to come and see and bid their final farewells to the late Timol.
It was very difficult to come to terms with the death of Ahmed. But at the same time, for many of us, it just strengthened our own determination and commitment to continue with the struggle, that we just had to intensify the struggle at all levels in order to get rid of this monstrous system of apartheid.
As far as this other matter of Timol is concerned, so I see no necessity to have a judicial inquiry at this moment.
They said that he had no injuries whatsoever. One would expect serious injuries from the fall. They were all fresh injuries, so they said. The evidence of Dr. Jonathan Gluckman was absolutely clear and convincing. There were injuries which were periodic, from 2 to 12 days, in different parts of his body.
There were other injuries that were inflicted before the fall, and that was crucial, that he was tortured, physically assaulted. And the state was strenuous in its objection to those findings. Now, how is it possible that he could just jump out like that with all the probable assaults that took place?
In inquests were held. The evidence was ignored by the magistrates, who were really the lackeys of the regime. And it didn't matter what the evidence showed. They gave very short judgments, 3 or 4 sentences, that there was no one to blame.
Few things in life are as painful as losing one's child. Anyone who doubted that had only to listen to the testimony of Ahmed Timol's mother as she told her story to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
They hit my son tremendously. They arrested him on a Friday and they killed him and said that he committed suicide. I want to know who assaulted him, and I want to know who lodged the complaint about my son. It is 25 years now, and that I will not forget what happened. I ask the Almighty that I will not forget what happened and that I need to know.
Death can also be an important political act. And it's not a waste of a life. Sometimes the death really helps to bring about the desired result. This is what I think that the people who died in detention contributed to the struggle. Not only what they did before they were arrested, but the fact that the regime found it necessary to kill them is an important factor that led to our liberation.
Did you know that Vilakazi Street is the only street in the world to have housed 2 Nobel Prize winners? Vilakazi Street in Orlando West, Soweto, southwest of Johannesburg in the Republic of South Africa, has been home to Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Nelson Mandela's house was a modest family house from 1946 and still maintains those features. Archbishop Desmond Tutu still owns his house in Vilakazi Street since 1975 and often goes to stay there when visiting Johannesburg. Because of its popularity, the street has an influx of tourists. Restaurants with local cuisine have mushroomed around it, creating job opportunities for the locals and improving the lifestyle in the area. Orlando West High School in Vilakazi Street is known for its creative role during the famous 1976 uprising.